All right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host today, Samantha Studebaker-Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Lori and Catherine and Sherry and Kenji and Jason and Cheryl. And today we're going to continue our discussion of the book Hunting Discomfort by Sterling Hawkins. See if I can sneak it up in here with my video. Here, it's not here. Okay. Anyway. Before we get going with that, though, I want to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then that's it. We'll just get going. We're on chapter 4 this time, so jump out,
Good
guys.
morning.
This is Cheryl from, go ahead, Lori.
No,
This is Cheryl from Maryland, Eldersburg, Maryland, to be exact.
Lori in snowy Denver.
Wow. Jason here in Tampa.
Sherry here in Eldersburg, Maryland, too.
Kenji, Gorham, Maine.
Good morning. This is Catherine Clement. Oh, Jason, did you get in there?
Yep.
Yeah, he did, I think. Yeah, okay. All right. Chapter 4, Discomfort number 2, Self-Doubt. Doubt kills more dreams than failure will. Susie Kassem. Ludwig van Beethoven is not your typical poster boy for self-doubt. His legacy is one of rising above the limitations of deafness to create music that resonates with power, confidence, and triumph throughout the ages. And yet, the world almost missed the gift of much of his music when the great composer lapsed into lethargy and a lengthy depression that coincided with his darkest period of self-doubt in his personal life. But this connection between self-doubt and creative drought was only understood after his death. His assistant, when cleaning out his desk, found a secret cache of letters written to his immortal beloved. For the longest unproductive musical period in Beethoven's adult life, he had been pouring his inspiration and emotions onto these pages and not composing musical scores. And he didn't even send these letters. He could release his music to the world, but not his love. In this area of his life, Beethoven was tormented by self-doubt. He never gave his beloved a chance to love him back, and he died unmarried, his romantic love unrequited. Thankfully, he did get back to composing. We'll never know how many masterpieces never came into being while Beethoven was mired in self-doubt about a relationship, but we can learn this from the eminent maestro. Self-doubt is a very human condition, and it plagues even the greatest amongst us. Unaddressed, it's a dream killer, and that's why in this chapter we are setting our sights on hunting self-doubt. Self-doubt is the no man's land of indecision between belief and disbelief. You know the feeling, mentally wrestling with questions and insecurities. This is often accompanied by a visceral sense that something terrible is going to happen, which sends adrenaline coursing through your body. When in the grips of self-doubt, you can feel utterly powerless. And if you don't address the discomfort of self-doubt, it can act like a self-fulfilling prophecy, causing you to retreat from your goals and dreams before you really give them a fair chance. I get it. It's natural to not want to spend time on something that's not guaranteed to work out. But if you let self-doubt call the shots, you are essentially guaranteeing those results. The romantic tragedy in Beethoven's life is paralleled in one way or another in all of us. Maybe your self-doubt is focused on worrying that you don't know enough about the new business idea you have, so you never start it. Or it's a plaguing insecurity that you've made the wrong choice in something, so shy away from making any other choices. Or maybe you suffer from anxiety about the potential embarrassment of publicly going after a goal and failing. That's the thing. Self-doubt knows when the stakes are high. That's why it shows up to kill our dreams, not our passing fancies. It feels like self-protection because it challenges our identity, but it is actually the opposite. Self-doubt feeds on fear and will devour all our ambition if we let it. We may never know the details of who Beethoven loved so deeply, but we know our own passions, our own goals, and our own dreams. We can hold on to them as regrets on our deathbed, or we can hunt the discomfort of self-doubt and do something about it. Needless to say, hunting this discomfort is not, well, comfortable. It's easier to wake up in the familiar world of self-doubt that 99% of people wake up in. A world of, I want, I wish, I hope, I could try, I might, and even I can't. Have you noticed how many times a day you utter those words? I want to hit my performance target. I wish we had some investors. I hope I can retire early. I could try to learn that new program. I might ask for that promotion. I can't possibly say that. Consistently expressing non-committal statements like this is a telltale sign that you are dealing with self-doubt. When we frame something as existing in the realm of only a possibility, we're avoiding the discomfort of being responsible for making something work out no matter what. Another telltale sign is a pattern of self-sabotage, killing your important projects, relationships, or business ideas before they have a chance to fail. You may be eliminating the discomfort of not knowing how things will turn out, but it's temporary relief that will leave you without any new results. Or perhaps you are the person who convinces yourself that you don't want a particular result to begin with in order to avoid the discomfort entirely. But pretending something that isn't true makes you the hunted. You'll never shake the ache of unfulfilled dreams. Yet another telltale sign of a self-doubter is someone who loves to reason their way out of something. Instead of facing their inner insecurity, they scour their external environment for faults, problems, evidence, or blame for why they can't move forward. Waiting for the perfect market conditions, the perfect age, perfect amount of money only leaves you waiting with the same old results you've always had. Maybe you've noticed by now that self-doubt is a form of not seeing the reality about yourself clearly. But the number one telltale sign that you've got a serious problem with self-doubt is that you are struggling with commitment. You want me to keep going?
Do we want to discuss some of our own self-doubt things that we've had over the years? I can think of well, a few as we were kind of reading through there. I was recognizing some of the stuff in myself, and of course one thing came out in particular, like when he's talking about at the beginning with Ludwig van Beethoven and his immortal love. And I can think back to, when I was younger, a teenager, and there was this boy, and I really liked him. And, I never could bring myself to even talk, tell him anything of the way that I was feeling. And I think back of that in that time every so often, and I'm like, what was it that I was so worried about? I mean, it seems so silly now looking back on that, but in the moment, in that time, it was just an overpowering feeling of just that complete self-doubt. Of course I didn't realize it at the time because when you're a teenager, you don't understand the dynamics of any of that stuff. But it's funny to me how self-doubt can just like sneak up in there with you. And this whole idea of it being like a connector with self-sabotage. I mean, that I hadn't really thought of it that way, of like these things where it's talking about I want this, or I should that, or I wish that, or whatever. And I know that excuses and that kind of thing are obviously methods of are indicators of self-doubt, but I hadn't really thought about the whole aspect of well, everything. What was I just saying? I lost my train of thought. Somebody else jump out.
Self-sabotage.
So, you talk about things in school, and I kind of think that as we're growing up, things that happen to us kind of plant the seed. I do remember thinking of some failures I had in high school that really affected me to such a degree that when I wanted to start off on something that was a dream of mine, I
I'm sorry, it's really
tried to
hard to hear.
start it. I'm sorry,
It's very hard
Jason.
to
What?
hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am leaning too far away from the mic. I was just saying that high school, the failures that you have in high school sometimes carry over into your later life. I know when I was starting out, there were things I wanted to try to do, and I found that I was more fearful of doing the things I wanted to do. Um, and I ended up stopping myself before ever really getting started. So
I
Yeah,
can barely remember ever not having self-doubt and self-sabotage. I can't even explain it. Go ahead, Jason.
it's really easy, I think. When you said 99% of the people out there have that, I think it's really easy for anyone to slip into that routine. Because I think it sort of aligns with our comfort zone a bit.
I think it's
I think it
interesting
also,
also when you think about the fact that, here we are struggling with self-doubt in ourselves for whatever reason, um and yet everybody else is too, and we forget that. We don't recognize it. We think we're the only ones that are suffering with this, and which makes it um I don't know. It makes it feel like it's such a big deal, whatever it is that you're trying to overcome, and particularly if it involves another person who you think maybe is more successful or has, I don't know, maybe it is somebody you want to get advice from or something along that lines, and and you think that they're just unattainable for whatever reason, and I think that has a lot to do with self-doubt, and if we can recognize that other people have self-doubt too, it may make it easier to make those interactions or connections. It's like I used to really struggle in social situations, and it was that was what the issue was. I don't know, I didn't really see it as self-doubt then. I just kind of like was like more of an introvert, and I'm not great at conversation, and or making or starting conversation, so I was always uncomfortable in those situations. But I at one point I was like, one way to think about it is everybody is kind of experiencing the same kind of a thing, that nervousness in a new situation where you're meeting new people, and that made it easier in some way. Sorry, Sherry, go.
oh, that's okay. I was just going to bring up the imposter syndrome. It's amazing how many people suffer from that. And, it's that fake it till you make it, fake it till you feel it kind of thing that a lot of people go through and feel like they discredit their own knowledge, their own know-how. And we tend to doubt ourselves a lot. And I think it's really hard to try to reach beyond that. I will tell you that I had something in my undergraduate program that was called speaking and writing across the curriculum. So every single class that I took, I had to give a speech and I had to write a paper. And I was a math major and a computer science major. So can you imagine some of the ideas they came up with for papers in those classes? But I think it really instilled a sense of self-confidence in me because of that. Just like practice makes perfect kind of thing. The more you do things, the more comfortable you feel with them.
I agree. I got, when I decided to go to college because my family was starving because I was, being a waitress and not making enough money. And I was a high school dropout, so everybody was telling me I couldn't do it, that I needed to just find a job. But that kind of encouraged me to like show them they were wrong about me. So that drove me forward. But then to actually get the college paid for, one of the things that I did was I signed up as for this group. Well, I got chosen to be part of this group that did public speaking for the college to try to bring money, investors into their college. And we had to go out and talk to Lions clubs and different people. And then we had to do, speeches in front of those people, sometimes the whole organization. So there was a lot of public speaking involved in it. And it really, really made a difference because I was just a shy Southern girl that, there's no way that I just was really introverted, and it made a huge difference in my life. And especially because I became a nurse, I really had to learn how to talk to people. I don't know where all that knowledge went because I don't have it anymore. I don't seem to be able to use it as well anymore.
If
But
you don't use it, you lose it.
that's right. If you don't use it, you lose it. And I really don't talk to a lot of people all the time. So, but I agree that getting over, well, they say that public speaking is like number 2 below death fears as far as biggest fears. So most people are petrified of public speaking. So to conquer one of your biggest fears is always extremely empowering.
Isn't that funny though, that that's like I don't know, survey taken at some point of biggest fears is public speaking, and yet 90% of the people never ever have to even be confronted with public speaking in any way, shape, or form, but it's a huge fear. It's so funny to me.
Yeah, I I would add to that, same here, I worked at a major corporation and had times where I needed to give a presentation, albeit a small presentation, but I was just filled with fear. And I remember, the worst part, I think, it was just the beginning. I was always so afraid of my voice cracking and the straining, the visible signs that I was nervous, and that would kind of propel me down that rabbit hole, and I would even get even more nervous. So this may not be the best way to address that situation, but the way I found a way to address it is I had been prescribed, when I left my ex-fiance years before, some Xanax for sleep, at night.
Yep.
And so I'd take a little bit of that Xanax, and it made all the difference. It just calmed my butt down. And it was just, I felt, that calm wash over me that Xanax provides. It's an anti-anxiety drug is what it is, and then I was like, I was good. I was pretty good, unless somebody asked me a question where I was fumbling. But that I can deal with. I can just say, I don't know. I'll get back to you. But definitely, I mean, I felt kind of guilty by using that particular method. But at the same time, I thought, thank you, God. I mean, I just took a tiny bit. I mean, it just calmed me down. So it was quite a bit of a saver for me. But at the same time, there were opportunities. Toastmasters was a big thing at our workplace. And I kept telling myself, I even had a friend of mine in Toastmasters, and she would encourage me, and I would encourage myself, and I still never went. This was for like 15 years. It was sort of available to me. and I never went. So yeah, it's really hard to challenge those things. And but if I could just mention, when I was young, um, if there had been classes, some kind of class for young people to address those things that we all feel as young people, those kind of fears, or if I had taken advantage of going to the guidance counselor or even getting in therapy, again, I didn't feel confident because I didn't get a lot of interaction and I guess asking how my day was and how I was doing from my parents. Because I could have explained that then. I'm not sure how they would have responded, but it would have been a way for a conversation to occur. I didn't have anybody to tell them about anybody to tell about my fears. And so I think sometimes young people, it would be so beneficial, and it could start a conversation like in elementary school, or early middle school, or middle school, about those sort of things that could be so beneficial to young people. It would have been to me, that everybody shares those fears, and you can talk about it, and you can be authentic, and you can start being authentic at a very young age. So
Yeah, for sure. There's so many things I've thought about over the years that they ought to be teaching in elementary school that would be so much more beneficial to kids these days, because they just they don't know how to communicate with each other, and they don't know how to interact with one another. And a lot of times it ends up that, they're making fun of one another for whatever reason, that over all these kinds of things, and I feel like we would just have a much more well-balanced group of young people coming into our adult world if we just could teach them some of the basics of just personal development things, as well as intercommunication skills. I mean, soft skills are a huge thing they should be teaching, and I don't understand why they don't teach that in elementary school. Why isn't that a required course along with English and math and science, is just basic soft skills? I mean, we use that in everything, and interpersonal communications is huge, and but no, it's lacking. That's our school system for you. But I don't know, do they even teach those kind of classes in college? Do they even have that option?
What do you mean
I
by
mean, unless you're in
soft skills?
psychology or something. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah, I
You say
definitely
soft
think like
skills?
a mental health class would be so beneficial to young people, and so that they realize. I mean, I just thought I was the only one who was so. I knew what being shy was, and I knew what being introverted was, which I was both. But all those other fears, if I had known other people shared and also had some of those other fears, I would have felt less alone and less burdened by having to figure those things out myself. Yeah, but
I feel like in school, I mean, that's probably the biggest issue that these kids face throughout their whole school life is self-doubt, and that is probably the thing that causes the most problems in school with interactions between children, is just in kids and young teens and all of that, is it's self-doubt. It's where bullying comes from, and that's where the making fun of each other comes from. It all comes from self-doubt, and if we just could recognize that and help kids learn how to just be human with each other, rather than mean and horrible because of their own insecurities. I mean, it's just so frustrating. But I'm not a teacher, nor I didn't go into that industry, or in that, not a direction I ever wanted to go. But I wish that, yeah.
Besides that, there's always that comparison and competition issue, that I got to be better than I am. I'm better than so and so, or the one you idolize or try to emulate.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one too, the competition. I really feel that in the school system, I don't know, there's just got to be a better way of trying to excel, but or just remind students that you just bring your best self, you know, and whatever that is good enough. And you don't have to get straight A's. You don't have to be better than one of the other students. I think, yeah, I definitely felt that in the corporate world, the competitiveness, and I definitely agree with Samantha about bullying in school. I mean, those are the ones that are probably more insecure than anybody. You know, those are the ones that go on to have narcissistic tendencies, you know, because they find that bullying gives them power over somebody else. And when they feel that that's gives them a little bit of a high or a good feeling, like, oh, I made them feel uncomfortable, and you know, and look, so I have this power. And it's, you know, there needs to be some major, any of that kind of behavior needs to be looked at a lot more closely than just um, telling the child or the student that, you know, that's wrong. I really think it needs to be addressed on a deeper level with major, like, counseling suggested, you know, to get at the root of that before it gets too big. So
I have a hard time identifying.
you have a hard time identifying?
No, I'm just kidding. I it's funny because it took a long time for me to realize that those feelings inside were mine, and to stop looking outside, you know, for the solution. But I did some public speaking when I was younger. I didn't have an alcohol or drug problem. I had a living problem. But I knew friends of mine that were in AA, so I developed an alcohol problem so I could go to AA, and I did. And so when I was 18, 19, 20, I did an awful lot of yapping at AA meetings, and I'd stand up in front of hundreds of people and tell what I thought was my alcohol story. And sometimes I could do it without the fear, and other times I would be mortified, where I was palpitated. I couldn't really think. The anxiety was overwhelming, and that was because, like you said, rather than being authentic, I was really worried about me. My focus was on me, and not on being authentic, and not just being really just who I was. That was a great learning experience, because as I got older, I got into sales, and in sales, especially in national sales where you're competing with other people, it's all, you know, you're calling somebody in the morning or something on the phone to try to pitch your product, and it can be it's a lot like public speaking. It can be incredibly nerve-wracking. But I think when we opened up, it talked about Beethoven, and I was thinking to myself, I know he was deaf, but he might have been a little blind too, because he couldn't really see himself for who he really was, and he definitely couldn't see himself for how other people saw. He saw himself through his own filter, which I find fascinating.
he saw himself as what? I missed that.
He couldn't see himself as he was. He saw himself through his own filters.
Okay.
Right. So
Meaning he did not have a high opinion of himself?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you know, all of this stems from self-doubt stems from, you know, our inability to be able to see ourselves for who we really are and to be authentic from the inside out, instead of trying to just fit in and be one of the crowd.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Yeah.
Today, it has to be about the message and not about me. If I'm going to speak in public, it's got to be about the message and not necessarily the messenger. It's not about me. So that I can be authentic and I can share how I'm feeling without all that fear and anxiety, which is a killer. I mean, I don't know if anybody's having a hard time identifying, but it seems like we all have the same. I was not aware that other people felt the same way that I do. And I'll close with that.
That's a different type of blindness to not know yourself and recognize and be able to speak authentically about it. That's another type of blindness, I think, that I just realized since you said that.
I think we often want to talk so bad that we say everything that jumps into our mind. And I think there's an art that we learn as we get older that sometimes things don't need to be said if the listener is not ready to hear it. We often think about what we want to say instead of what the person's ready to hear or what they need to hear. We say what we need to say instead of focusing on the listener.
That's a good point.
You
I
mean we
really
have to focus
wonder
on the
how.
listener too?
Sorry, Jason, go.
What did you say, Jason?
We have to focus on the listeners too. We have to not focus. We're already focused on, like, so hyper focused on every little thing, the way we're dressed, the way we're situated, the way we're standing, presenting, how we sound, how we smell, everything, I mean, our timing, and then we have to also worry about everyone who's listening and if they understand.
And
I think I really do agree with what Kenji said in regards to the message, focusing on the message. I think this is one of those situations where that saying I think everyone's hearing about, where your mind goes or your focus goes, the energy flows. And if you're focused on anything other than the message that you're trying to convey, then you're probably losing a step.
that's what I was thinking, that how am I supposed to know what someone else is ready to hear? I mean, I understand if you know them personally, but in a public place, how are you supposed to know what they're ready to hear? You just bring your message and let them figure that out. That confused me, Cheryl.
I think you got to obviously be cognizant of where you're at and who you're talking to. But I mean, we're all pros at hiding how we feel.
Most of the time we're talking to people in a smaller scale. We're not giving presentations all the time. And that saying that we have one mouth and two ears for a reason, because we should listen twice as much as we talk.
That's a good one, Sherry.
I think job interviews are the same thing. When you're handing your resume and you're sitting down in front of a CEO of a company that you really want to be involved in. That little blue pill that you talk about, it came in handy for me as well. Especially when I was flying around the country, and the thought of being at 30,000 feet in a tube and not having access to emergency medical devices was terrifying to me. Not to mention the flight itself.
The blue pill, are you talking about the Xanax that I mentioned?
Yes.
Okay.
I carried 0.25, and I would take a half of a 0.25, so a very small amount of 0.5, just enough to take the edge off it, so that when I stuck my hand out and I shook the hand of the CEO. It was warm, it was embracing, and it was confident, not wet, drippy, and clammy, which is how I felt on the inside.
I understand. I totally understand. Yep. Yep. I feel you. Absolutely, Kenji.
So chasing discomfort, I mean, we could give our kids this book. I mean, it's a journey on the in. That's what this is.
Yeah, and that's why those kind of conversations should start with parents. Addressing what the child is feeling and acknowledging that that's, I felt like that before, and this is not unusual, and this is normal, and this is how I handled it. Like, I wish my parents had been able to talk about those sort of things. Or a relative. I wasn't close to any relatives. They didn't live near me. If I or yeah, it's just when you're, and when you talk to girlfriends, they're usually struggling with this sort of thing too, where it's not an easy thing to bring up, you know? So yeah, I'm just saying, as children, I feel for those that, especially life is even more, there's even more duality to deal with nowadays. It seems that way anyway. More worries for kids, and life's a little more complicated. So there's plenty of self-doubt still going around for young people. And
exactly. And that's assuming that your parents are able to have that kind of conversation and be able to guide it and direct it to something different. And in all of humanity's effort to simplify life has really in some ways made it more complicated. I love the fact that I can set my robot vacuum cleaner to vacuum while I'm doing something else. And we have automatic dishwashers and laundry, the washing machine. I put my laundry in, it can do something else. So part of it is simplified, and then you add these gadgets that we use, our phones and computers, and adds more of the competitive aspect. I can't keep up with all of the programs to effectively do some type of business that accommodates my abilities and aptitudes and all of that. I'm not sure how to solve all this, right?
oh yeah, well that brings in more self-doubt as we get older. I'm with you. I mean, it seems like every time I turn around, there's a new way to pay. There's a new pay for whatever service. There's a new portal to go into for our medical health, and there's constantly, because they keep updating technology, we have to try to keep up with that. And that creates some anxiety and self-doubt right there. But that is the way it is. It's that's something I accept. And when I might put it off. I'll put that off to when I want to deal with that. And then there'll be a day where I'll say, okay, I'm going to take on this challenge and figure it out, or I'm going to call somebody who's going to help me. So I know what you're talking about. It never ends. But I don't have the self-doubt I used to. I mean, I know I can do these things. At least I think I can. But there is that concern as I get older. I'm 66 now. Like in my 70s, am I going to still have cognitive skills and enough to keep up with these? I mean, I don't have any kids to say, do this for me. So I know what you're talking about, Lori.
Can I circle back to the what we should teach kids in school conversation?
Oh, please do.
So I've been a firm believer that we should teach our children how to set boundaries, how to have people follow the boundaries you set, better communication skills. But then I was thinking about it in depth, and I realized that if we do that, even in elementary school, the parents aren't going to have the skill set. So you're going to have little kids, elementary school kids, going home to their parents, setting these boundaries, and it would be so combative, which is why I don't think they introduce it. And it's shocking to me because, like, that's like basic skills of humans that I think takes everyone a while to learn. You know, the people that always say yes to everything have to learn to set the boundaries and not worrying what people think about you, and being able to have that self-confidence, because we're all different in every way and there are things that we all excel in. But to teach kids that, I don't know that we could do that. And I almost feel like they have to be an adult before they know those things.
Interesting.
That's what children's books are for. Ha ha ha.
Well, and
Well,
I
yeah, and I
totally agree
think
with
that,
Sherry. I was going to actually say before that if the parent doesn't know how to deal with the stressors of all that's going on in the world, how are they going to, and I'm not thinking of the word, but support what the children are learning in school? You know, and the
They're not.
kids are going to try to tell the parents, this is what you should be doing, mom. And then the parents getting angry at the child because it might not be something, or they might think that their feelings are being minimized.
well, and I think that teaching kids the, basic interpersonal communication skills is kind of the key, that aspect. And also the other side of it is learning how to be, not let what other people say hurt you. That's a big one that I feel like kids need to learn too, because, and then recognizing that other people are going through tough things and difficulties and struggle with communication and all of those kinds of things. Because if we can give the kids more internal fortitude and more understanding about how each of us is going through something and struggling with. I mean, I know that it seems like a gargantuan effort to try and teach some of these things, and but yet there are ways to do it. And it's like there's a company called I don't remember what the company's called, but they created a children's journal called Big Life Journal. And it's all about improving internal self-confidence. And the parent goes through it with the child on the younger level one. And so they learn the lessons together. And I feel like that's a big one. But if they were to have some of these things in schools, as, instead of teaching some of the things that they used to teach, as far as I don't know what grade you get into and you start doing book reports, and we're doing book reports on silliness that doesn't really have any value. And if we did book reports on things like how to win friends and influence people, or or psycho-cybernetics, or any of those kinds of things, where we learn these things, we learn how the brain starts to work, we learn how interpersonal communications work, and we get better at communicating ourselves as a child, then even navigating the relationships with our parents would be easier, because we could recognize, okay, my mom's just having a day or whatever, and I don't need to take that personally, and and I understand the whole setting boundaries things, but I think that comes with having self-confidence, and teaching self-confidence is a huge part of it. So I think that there's a way to start, and I don't know how to go about influence the educational system on that. All we can do is keep, putting it out there that, we need to help our kids be stronger, emotionally stronger, with self-fortitude, and better educated in general. I mean, shoot, I was reading the newspaper the other day. It's real newspaper. Fun. We have a newspaper in our county. Actually, we have a couple of them, but I was reading in there, they were talking about literacy rates in our county, and how Indiana's falling behind some of the other states, and their worries about it. And I'm like, and I get that, but at the same time, we've got other things that I worry about too, so.
The idea of that old phrase, I imagine everybody here has heard, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
fake.
Yes.
Yeah, we've taught that for years and years and years. We've said that saying, but nobody ever really digs into what exactly does that mean. You know, we can say it all day long, but if you don't understand what that means and that you are the producer of your feelings, not the other person, no matter what that other person says, you know, unless you teach them. And I've been trying to teach, you know, Bailey, she's going to be 8 this year. And you know, we've been going through the Big Life Journal, and we've been, you know, having conversations when, you know, she's feeling fear, she's feeling insecurity or self-doubt, as we have those conversations. And I'm glad I can be here for her to be able to have that. But yet in day-to-day life, and with the, you know, with my son and daughter-in-law and my husband, and are all interacting, the kids are all screaming, there's a whole bunch of just stop. You know, it's hard to find that balance of, you know, creating good interpersonal communications with children, and yet also managing a life and a household of people and our everyday everything. But there's a place to start for sure. There's definitely a place to start, and trying to get some of this into schools would be great. Yeah.
Well,
If you had read my
Shucks.
journal, if you'd read my journal this morning, it's uncanny that we're talking about this, because when my mom was 22, I was 5. So my parents were children when they had me. And, you know, I've spent my entire life trying to figure out who I am. So these have lifelong, there was no talking about feelings in my home. It was the only feeling we showed was anger, or complete and utter breakdown. There was no in between, because they were children.
Yeah.
So if we gave a test, you know, I think you could give children a simple little test, 1 through 10, and ask them some feelings, questions about feelings and things about that, and you would know immediately. And I'm sure the teachers and the educators know what these kids, where they're coming from. They know. I mean, you can see the child that's got the issue, the one that stands off, or the one that acts out, or the one that's angry, or the one that can't be. So those are just a mirror, a microcosm of what's really going on in their home with their parents. So we had a really nice veneer, nice home, super clean, but they were not. They were abusive. I mean, there was physical abuse and there was mental abuse. And the reason we had that veneer was because they were too afraid somebody might scratch that surface and start to ask questions. So that's what I did. I learned that as long as I looked good on the outside, maybe they would leave me alone. But for me, school was terrifying. And I did not like it. I didn't know how to get along with kids. I didn't know really how to be in that environment. And I had a lot of behavioral issues. So that's my story.
Yeah. I think a lot of kids struggle with that. And yeah. Go ahead, Catherine.
I wasn't trying to say anything.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I thought I heard you say something. Sorry. Somebody else.
Well,
I'll hop on real
addressing.
quick.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Samantha, with a lot of that. And you know, like when you talk about digging down into the sayings that, you know, like what Lori was mentioned, you know, it's hard to make, you know, say, hey, that's what you're supposed to be thinking. You know, words will never hurt you, when the actuality is that when people are saying hurtful things, or not even saying hurtful things, just interrupting you in the middle of what you're trying to say, if you've been waiting, you know, patiently in your turn to like then get your point across, or say something that you really need to say, and it's already having a fear to say it, but then you finally go to say it and someone jumps in and and ruins your focus and ruins your point, steals your thunder or whatever it might be, that's hurtful. So then for parents to say, well, sticks and stones, but words will never hurt you, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So doesn't just to say that saying and not boil it down or dig deeper into it, like you were saying, Samantha, definitely is kind of one of the things that reasons I have a problem with so many of the cliches out there, because everyone says the cliche, but then just leaves it at that and doesn't ever, hardly ever, digs into it to explain what they mean by it. And if you do actually dig into it a little bit deeper and have a conversation about it, I've noticed that many times people have a different understanding of what a specific cliche actually means. And so we're hearing the same words, but we're thinking they have different meanings. And that's a big problem too, because we're not really, even when we communicate sometimes, we're not actually understanding what each other is saying. And just another point I'd like to make is I think one of the best things for young kids to do, or at least for me, I think it would have just been better to say, hey, those feelings of fear or whatever you're feeling, those are normal. Everyone has them. Don't focus on that. Focus on what you're trying to do. Prepare for your speech or whatever it is. Just focus on that and focus on the very best outcome that can possibly be. And don't think about anything else. And if those fears come up, they're normal. Let it go and continue to focus like a laser on what it is you want to accomplish. And I think that I see a lot about the main problem being we have a lack of an ability to focus these days, for a lot of different reasons. And we've been heading in this direction even before the internet, where people's attention spans have just shrunk to almost nothing. And without focus, man, I mean, it's hard to get anything accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I agree completely with that. One of the things that shocks me being in a college setting is the students coming from high school haven't even learned how they learn. They don't know how to study. The only reason some of them have been successful is because they have a 35-hour week where the teachers are teaching them in every learning style they can in order to try to connect. And the student doesn't know that's what's happening. And then, so they spend 35 hours a week in high school, and then they go to college and they have 15 hours worth of classes. And they don't know why that's full time. They don't know that they should be studying another 30 hours on top of those 15 hours, which would make it 45 hours total, which is a full-time job. So they're spending maybe 4 hours a week studying, and then they're struggling. And it's really odd to me that they don't even know how to learn and how to study according to their way of learning. We haven't taught them that. All we've done is bombard them with every style that we can in order to hopes that it'll stick on them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, shoot, that should be like a main thing in elementary school is determining your learning style and your cognitive abilities and your just all of that. I mean, but no, they just throw them all in there together and hope for the best. And the only ones that get any extra anything is if they are special needs in some way and or they go to a separate school. It's like my family has dyslexia in the history. My mother struggled with that. My brother really struggled with it, and so he had to go to a different school that taught him how to read, compared to what the way they were teaching it in regular school. And they had to teach a number of different things with that, and that was all that made the difference for him. But if we could recognize in elementary school, if there should be some kind of I don't know. I don't even know how you would figure that out. But I mean, obviously, we
It's
know that everybody
is
learns in a different way.
yeah,
Yeah. There's
obvious,
got,
right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then like my whole thought on, it's like career exploration. Here we are in elementary school and middle school, and we're learning math, reading, science, all of these things. And they're not teaching us how it applies to careers and why we might want to learn any number of those things. So then when you get into high school, you're still having all this stuff shoved down your throat with no concept of how it could potentially relate to you in life. Whereas if they were to, like I was talking about book reports or presentations, like in English, we used to have to write these long papers, these big reports where you'd have to do the bibliographies and you'd have to do the all the presentation, all of the everything. You'd have to stand in front of the class and you'd have to pick some random subject and they wouldn't give you any concept as to why you had to do this, But yet, if we were to say, okay, we're going to do all of this, focus whole career, like the whole part of your school is figuring out how you learn, how, what your best, it's not skills, but like what you're good at. And then here's all the possible career paths that could be related to that. Now, here going forward in school, you're going to divide off and you're going to be, learning all of these subjects relating to these different possible career paths. I mean, imagine how much more prepared our kids would be for life in general.
It's called aptitudes, what you were designed, what you are good at, and those aptitudes and your learning style, like you were saying, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think there are various testing tools throughout, if I recall correctly, throughout school, but I'm not sure they gleaned, those kind of information from those particular tests. I think the tests were kind of to get general information of what you knew and how placement of classes, whether you were in the higher classes like the honors classes or the lower classes. Correct me, Sherry, if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that there were tests, right? Yeah,
But they didn't show how they relate to us.
right.
I remember taking personality tests and I liked it because I thought it was pretty cool, but it didn't really go into it. I remember when my son was 5 years old and I was trying to teach him our phone number. We moved to a new house when he was 5. So he would start kindergarten at a certain school. And I remember I told him what it was. I said it to him. I wrote it down, and I said it, and I wrote it down and I said it. And 3 nights later, I'm getting frustrated. And so I'm like, 552, and I start acting out the phone number. And he remembered it like that. And that same night, I taught him our whole address, including zip code, that same night, because I changed the way I was saying it. I acted it out. And he's a kinesthetic learner, which is the hardest learner for school if you are bodily, physically learn. But he would stomp up and down the stairs doing his spelling words and remember it. And so if we could just change the way students study, they could retain information so much easier. Now in school, they try to do that. Teachers, so K through 12 teachers, have been taught how to teach in these styles. But college, we're content experts and we have never been taught to teach, which is really interesting to me, which I think we're missing the boat there too.
And there again, all of this separates them into different categories, which flares up the self-doubt and the self-recognition, and we're really, squashing the individuality.
Yeah, and if they could teach kids, okay, here we've discovered you took this test and we've discovered you're this type of a learner. And this is an empowering thing to know. you know, because when you can discover that you learn in this way, that means that you will, everything that you do that you want to learn, you can make it 10 times easier. And you know, just like this person who over here is able to, like, I don't know, have photographic memory and remember everything, you can have that same if you just study in this different way, or you know, you when you learn these things about yourself, it's empowering, and it is an individual thing, and we can encourage that individualism in our youth so that they can become more empowered in their future. And you know, just like with learning how you learn, it's just as important to discover the things that get you fired up versus, you know, squashing your personality. And because that can focus the whole trajectory of your life if you just have some freaking clue and you're helped in school to find those things, that, you know, we would all be so much more successful in life. And I'm not saying that, you know, we don't have success, but I feel like it's just, it would be easier, and people would find things they really truly love and be encouraged in that way versus, you know, you get out of school and, you know, it's either the college path or the work path. And if you've been lucky enough to keep your life focused in the right direction to, you know, go to college and not end up struggling in life because of whatever, and have to have a job and have just to survive. And, you know, I mean, well, we could talk all day and all night on this.
I
If we're
really think
not careful. Sorry.
I really think that a really key something that could be so beneficial if they had the education budget. Well, there's another reason why it probably would be an impossibility for them to have mentors for the kids. For the kids to actually have mentors, like one of the teachers would take like 2 or 3 kids and mentor them individually and discuss some of these very things that we're talking about. But of course, teachers' lives are already packed full, as Sherry can attest to. But or even if they had a mentorship program where they just hired a few people to do that particular effort, I think it would make a lot of difference. Definitely, like a one-to-one situation, showing somebody that they could trust and that would help lead them down the path and kind of dig out of them, like, what do you like, or how do you learn, or figure out those kind of things that we're all talking about. So I really think it would probably be better to do it on a one-to-one basis. But again, you know, there's not enough money, and probably that would not land well in terms of, but I think it's something we should do. I think that's maybe the future.
If we're not careful here, somebody's going to see this broadcast and hire us to be the new Department of Education.
Oh, that's a big possibility. Okay, I hear you. No, but if anybody sees this and just, you know, take an idea, you know, and maybe talk about it more, you know, as long as, you know, I think if that's out there in the collective consciousness, you know, it might take some steam, and it, you know, there's at least a possibility that could catch on. But I think it would be really a great idea, you know, to give that individual
Absolutely.
attention. Yeah.
I think
think that maybe,
unfortunately a lot of that is would need, you know, it's a great idea and probably very, you know, needed, but it's sort of, you know, if we didn't, like the way schools are set up and what they're doing and how the parents are talk about this, the schools and the teachers and the media talks about how terrible the schools are, and you know, kids are listening, and then they have their teachers that are the authorities who are going to judge them and give them grades that are going to then, well, you know, it's almost like it's the school's better at teaching and ingraining the fear of authority and that's why what you're saying is very needed. And it's like, if we could just change that dynamic to where the kids are more open to reaching out to the teachers. For instance, I was well into junior college before I realized that all these kids that were getting A's, they were going to the teachers before the reports were due and showing them their report and saying, hey, how is this? What do I need to do more? What can I do more? And the teacher would just tell them, and then they'd end up with an A because they were going to the teachers. It was like they were cheating. They were allowed to actually talk to the teachers and get help. I mean, for me, it wasn't like I had a fear of the teachers, but it just was like, school's out. Okay, I can go play. I've got homework to do. But I never thought about going, hey, we've got this report coming up. I've got it done this far. What else do I need to do? Or how do I prepare for this exam? How can I get some extra credit to give me a 4.3 average instead of a 4 or whatever? It's like, there's just, nobody came to me and told me that. Nobody told me that, hey, if you wanted to study something more than you were being taught in class, then you should just ask, and you will find something for you to read or learn. Because I mean, I actually had the issue where in grade school, the teachers thought I was like not doing so well, and the teacher came to my mom and they're like, what are you talking about? He's well above what you're doing. He's already tested through that. He's bored with what you're doing. He's having a hard time paying attention, and he's letting all the other kids do the stuff because he's bored, and he's not interested in what you're doing because he's interested in this other stuff. And that's there's no communication between the students and the teachers, is I guess what I'm getting at. And it's sort of ingrained into what the way that things are taught, and also in the way that parents deal with the school system in a lot of ways. They put blame on the teachers, blame on the school system. So, and the kids listen, they hear everything that's being said about people. So they form their opinions. You just imagine how they form their opinions. But anyway, I'll let someone else speak. Sorry.
Thank you all.
Good discussion. Good discussion.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Lori.
Okay.
Kids,
Bye.
Have a great week,
Everybody have
everyone.
a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine, everyone. See you next week.